Hi. As a doctor for 53 years in Perth in Western Australia, I first worked in hospitals, then was a family doctor for many years in the suburbs, doing everything, helping to bring 800 babies into the world, um, treating all sorts of infections, taking out quite a few appendixes and tonsils, mending a few broken bones, and seeing a lot of distressed people um, with anxiety and depression and so on. And in 1997, I started to work 10 hours a week in an addiction clinic, which was basically a heroin clinic. We were having a terrible epidemic of heroin addiction in Perth, and I was seeing young people who told me they were the last person left standing. All their friends had OD'd on heroin. And I had one patient, a young man who came from Queensland, who said he'd been a dealer there, and sometimes he had $70,000 in cash under his bed, but he had to leave there when so many died that he thought he would die too if he didn't leave. It appeared to me that addiction was a health problem, and with health problems you've always got to know the causes. If you don't know the causes, it's hard to fix the problem, and people very often relapse. So I visited every addiction clinic in Perth and Sydney and asked what's the cause of addiction, and couldn't find a single addiction worker who knew what the cause was or thought that was important. Oh, they're just dickheads chasing highs. But then one day in the addiction clinic where I was working 10 hours a week, I saw 15 heroin addicts one day, and 5 of them had ADHD. And people used to say, oh, addiction causes mental ill health problems. But these people had had their ADD, ADHD since they were children. It had troubled their schooling. They had become problem pupils. They hadn't done well. But somewhere much later in their teens or 20s or 30s, they started on heroin and became addicts. And they were in great distress because the main medicine used for heroin then was methadone, which is about 5 times more addictive than methadone. And they were allowed to be prescribed methadone because nobody knew they had ADD. But the rule was, as a safeguard, that because the 3 medicines for ADD, ADHD, dexamphetamine, Ritalin, and Adderall, are all addictive, those medicines were not allowed to be prescribed for addicts. So these people were heroin addicts, they had awful ADD, ADHD, and they weren't allowed to be prescribed the medicine for ADD, ADHD. So then I started to ask every new addict about their childhood, their early family life, how they got on at school, and what their employment was and what had happened to them since. And it was quite clear that 19 out of 20 of them had had mental health distress long before they became addicts. The commonest problem was anxiety or worry problems of various sorts. General anxiety, social anxiety, panic attacks, obsessive compulsive disorder, and phobias of different sorts. And there was a lot of depression, major depression, and there was a lot of bipolar disorder, the high-low disorder, and a lot of ADD, ADHD, quite a lot of post-traumatic stress disorder, a lot of people with very low self-esteem who'd had unfortunate childhoods in sort of very poor conditions, slum-like conditions, and had great inferiority complexes. There were some people who had what I called IAD, irritability anger disorder. There didn't seem to be a name for that, but it seemed to be a definite disorder. A lot of people suffered from irritability, anger, violence, irritability, anger, rage and violence. So I called that IAD. And quite a lot of people had post-traumatic EF, post-traumatic evil focus, that had terrible things happen to them, such as childhood sexual abuse or severe traumas of other sort. And they couldn't cope with this terrible big personal problem, so they distracted themselves by focusing on the CIA or Guantanamo Bay or conspiracy theories or the terrible things people were doing to women and children in some country. So it appeared to me that the treatment of addicts was very unsuccessful. In the clinic that I worked 10 hours a week, they just gave everyone a 50 milligram naltrexone tablet every day, but they wouldn't stay on it very long. And the people in that clinic said, oh, they just want to go back on heroin. But that wasn't the problem. That the 50 milligrams of naltrexone gave them terrible side effects, gave them terrible anxiety, restlessness, inability to sleep, sometimes even almost psychotic symptoms. 50 milligrams of naltrexone. Naltrexone is a wonderful medicine, but 50 milligram tablets are about 17 times too strong. A very, very wise doctor, Dr. Bernard Bahari, who was the addiction commissioner for New York and had 41 methadone clinics under him in New York and was looking for something better, tried giving his patients naltrexone and they wouldn't stay on it, and he realized quite quickly that 50 milligrams was just too much. So he trialed 1 to 10 milligrams and found that 3 milligrams was the best dose. 3 milligrams blocks the opiate receptors for 3 hours, which blocks heroin from working for 3 hours. but in that time, the brain and glands try to fight back and overcome the opioid receptor block by increasing endorphin production by 250 to 300%. The idea of naltrexone is that it was developed to block the opiate receptors, which are little landing sites on brain and nerve cells where heroin lands and gets into the cells and causes the heroin effect. And they thought if they developed a medicine that blocked the opiate receptors, then that would block heroin and the heroin addiction would be gone. But in 1963 in Long Island, New York, they came up with naltrexone, and the FDA approved the 50 milligram tablets. But it blocks heroin and addictive painkillers and alcohol for 24 hours. But what they didn't realize was that we have opiate receptors on our brain cells and nerve cells because we produce opiates. The opiates that we produce naturally were later discovered and called endorphins, which is endogenous morphines, because they are morphine-like. They stop pain and they help to relieve stress. But that was what caused terrible side effects. With 50 milligrams of naltrexone, people just weren't getting any endorphins. But when they took 3 milligrams instead of 50 milligrams, and it blocked the opiate receptors for 3 hours, and their endorphin-producing cells fought back and tried to overcome the block with 250, 300% increase in endorphins. When the 3-hour block wore off with 3 milligrams of naltrexone, all those extra endorphins got into the cells and made people feel much better. And it worked very well. Except there was a problem. The problem was that even 3 milligrams of naltrexone given to someone who's got any heroin or addictive painkiller or other opioids in them, that gives them a terrible side effect called rapid detox for about 15 minutes. So even low-dose naltrexone didn't go very far in the treatment of heroin addiction. But I thought that maybe we should try even less than 3 milligrams of naltrexone. So I tried from 1/8 of a milligram to 1.5 milligrams and found that if you gave heroin addicts or opioid painkiller addicts 3/4 of a milligram, it didn't give them any side effects, and it gave them relief from their craving, which lasted for about an hour. After an hour they start to crave again. You give them another 3/4 of a milligram, and it didn't cause any side effects, and they were and the craving stopped for another hour. And then you gave them another 3/4 of a milligram, and if you gave them 3/4 of a milligram doses about once an hour for 8 or 10 hours, they could then take 1.5 milligrams of naltrexone, And when it was 24 or 36 hours since they'd had any heroin or addictive painkiller, they could take 2.25 milligrams of naltrexone, and when they had no heroin or addictive painkiller for 72 hours, they could take the 3 milligrams low-dose naltrexone, and they felt good because their endorphins were so high, and they didn't relapse. Dr. Bahari called 3 milligrams low-dose naltrexone LDN, and there's now a World LDN conference every year since 2014 in Las Vegas, and you can get great information by going to the LDN Research Trust website, LDN Research Trust website. I called 3/4 milligram every hour RMN, repeated microdose naltrexone. But about that time in New York, they discovered they had AIDS, and a lot of the people they thought were dying with heroin are actually dying of AIDS. They didn't realize that it had got to New York, and they were much more worried about HIV, and some people thought it was going to wipe out whole cities. So Dr. Bahari didn't solve the 3 milligram initial dose rapid detox problem, and he concentrated on HIV and also on cancer, because the widow of a close friend of his came to him and told him that she had malignant lymphoma, a type of cancer, and that she'd had it 5 years before and treated with chemotherapy and radiotherapy, and it had gone away, but it had come back, and they now thought that the chemo wouldn't help the second time, and also she hated the chemo. So Dr. Bahari gave her low-dose naltrexone, and she lived another 9 years and died of an unrelated heart attack. And in 1986, Dr. Bahari went to a conference in Paris and met a woman doctor there who had malignant melanoma, and she had 4 malignant melanoma that had spread to her brain, and she was on her way out. So he put her on low-dose naltrexone also, and she lived for another 18 years and died of something else. So sadly, naltrexone hasn't been repeated. Microdose naltrexone, to my knowledge, hasn't been used very widely globally. Western Australia is at the end of the world, and pretty hard to spread stuff from Perth, but I'm doing my best. And of course, the pharmaceutical industry didn't like RMN or LDN because it's so cheap. I buy the naltrexone tablets from India, 50 milligram tablets from India, for about a bit under $2 each, because in Australia it's subsidized for alcohol but not for heroin, and it costs $150 for 30 tablets in Australia. and from one tablet you can get 17 doses of low-dose naltrexone, and you can get 70 doses of RMN. But what I realized was that people with addiction needed dual diagnosis treatment. Dual diagnosis treatment is diagnosing and treating the mental health issues at the same time as treating the addiction. And I couldn't find anyone back then who was doing it, but I'm very happy to say lots of people are doing it now, and you can find them by searching dual diagnosis. And in Western Australia in the 1970s, they split addiction treatment from mental health treatment. So there were mental health clinics and there were addiction clinics. And the mental health clinics refused to see addicts. And the addiction clinics didn't know anything about mental health, didn't recognize it, didn't treat it even if it was very obvious, and even simple cases that would have responded well to simple treatment, just not treated. So a high percentage of the heroin addicts had to stay on methadone for years and years. The big clinic here in Perth was proud that on average its heroin addicts stayed on methadone for 5.5 years. Well, I'd be totally ashamed if I had addicts that stayed on horror medicine like methadone for 5.5 years and suffered all the problems of methadone, so dangerous that you couldn't take it home. You had to go to the pharmacy every day, which made it difficult to be employed. And you couldn't go anywhere because you could only get it from your pharmacy. So if a friend got married or got buried in the country somewhere, you couldn't go to the wedding or the funeral because you had to be had to go to your pharmacy every day to get the methadone. But and at that time I was doing methadone as well. But I was very unhappy about giving potent addictive medicines to addicts. And then we discovered that Subutex, which is a sort of opiate about as addictive as heroin, was much better than methadone. And we started to give patients Subutex. Still addictive, so they still had to keep on coming back and getting repeat prescriptions and adding to the waiting list. And then they made Suboxone, which was supposed to be better because they combined some naloxone with the Subutex. Naloxone is a heroin blocker, but they put a tiny dose of naloxone, which only works for half an hour, with a big dose of Subutex, which works for 24 hours. So it was just a scam. And that was my dual diagnosis was so successful that my little one-man clinic, one-doctor clinic, in 17 months, completely wiped out the big 6 or 8 doctor clinics' 8-week waiting lists. After 17 months, their waiting list was 0. And that was embarrassing for them, and they worried for their jobs. So they were the people who were in charge of prescribing medicine for addicts, and they just wrote me a letter, no warning, no justification, just you're not following our guidelines, so you cannot prescribe Subutex or Suboxone anymore. They didn't think I prescribed methadone because I said it was worse than rat poison. But my patients kept coming back and saying, look, Subutex is much better than methadone, but we'd rather have methadone and mental health care than Suboxone and no mental health care. So my clinic didn't shut down, which is, I'm sure, what the health department wanted. But after a couple of years, they wrote me a letter and said, you can't prescribe methadone either. And that was meant to close me down. But I, by that time, had discovered repeated microdose naltrexone. So I kept going. So then they reported me to the medical board for acting as a psychiatrist when I wasn't a psychiatrist. And that did close me down. But dual diagnosis is definitely what everyone with an addiction should have. I was very interested in what the people who suffered most and got the worst treatment. Why did the people who suffered most get the worst treatment? Which they did. They got the worst treatment. They should have had dual diagnosis with repeated microdose naltrexone, instead of which they got methadone or Suboxone and no mental health care. And now, of course, there are addictive Subutex monthly injections that in the US cost $2,100. $2,100 for an injection. In Australia, the government subsidises that, but it still costs the government, I think, $400 or $500 per monthly injection. But mental health and addiction seem to be getting worse. We were falling behind. Everywhere there was waiting lists, and the waiting lists were getting longer. Lots of people were not getting any treatment, and nobody was getting enough treatment. And why was that? Well, there were two reasons. Everything today is done with good tools. Everything. The kitchen, the garden, factories, technology, everything is done with good tools. But what are the tools for mental health and addiction? Well, there are two tools, and they've both got terrible weaknesses. The first tool is talk therapy or psychotherapy. And the first problem with psychotherapy is that to do good psychotherapy, you have to have very long training, so the therapists are scarce and costly. And the second problem with talk therapy is it's so damn slow. You take hours and hours to solve problems, and usually don't solve them. When people are a bit better, those on the waiting list are more desperate, so their treatment gets stopped and someone else from the waiting list comes in. And medicine has got a terrible conflict of interests between the people who take medicine and the people who make medicine. The people who take medicine want medicine to work quickly and to be effective and to get better and to be able to stop the medicine. But the business people who make medicine want people to take as much medicine as possible for as long as possible, and preferably not to ever be able to do without the medicine. So they make a lot of medicines addictive. Of the common mental health conditions, the commonest are the anxiety, worry type, insomnia type problems, and all the medicines for that are addictive. When I first started practice, it was I'll think of it in a minute. Barbiturates. But barbiturates were addictive and they're horrible. And in about 1960, we got Valium and Seropax and Mogadon and all those sort of things. And they're all addictive. I struggled hard to find a non-addictive calming medicine to give to my heroin addicts who needed calming. But I saw people taking 100 Valium a day, lots of people taking 20 or 30 or 50 a day. One who was taking 200 Valium a day and spent all day going from doctor to doctor getting prescriptions. And the pharmacy told me that this person would come in with his prescription for 50 Valiums. He'd get the 50 Valiums, and as he walked out the door, he'd take the whole lot in one gulp. Because addictive medicines lose their effect. That's why people take more and more. They screw up your chemistry, and then your chemistry becomes resistant to them, so you have to take more and more to get the relief, and then you can't stop them, because if you do, you'll hang out, because your chemistry has been so distorted by all this foreign substance that you feel very bad without the foreign substance. So what had appeared to me was that there were never going to be enough doctors and psychologists and therapists and counsellors to treat all the people with mental health problems and related addictions. We were just getting further behind. So was there a solution? Well, the solution was good tools. They had two bad tools, but what we needed was 7 or 8 good tools, and we needed self-help, and we needed the treatment to start early, because when people have a mental illness, when it first starts, the cause is usually pretty obvious. It's fairly simple and straightforward. But after 6 months or 2 years or 5 years or 10 years, it gets worse and worse, and it causes other complications. The ADD causes poor education, poor employment, unemployment, poverty, homelessness. It just goes on and on. So it's terribly important to start treating a person with mental illness as early as possible. The later it starts, the longer it'll take to help them, the longer the waiting list gets. So I was swamped with work because so many people wanted dual diagnosis treatment and there was nowhere else they could get it. So I started to make some tools. This is a long time ago, but the first tool was a 20-question paper checklist, and I got my nurse to do that with the addiction patients when they came in, so that I could look at the result of the checklist and in 3 minutes could learn as much about that patient as it took 23 or 33 minutes, which I didn't have. And also I started to make videos. 10 years ago I made the first video. It was about 10 minutes, I think, and it got 10,000 viewings in 9 months. I thought, that's wonderful, so I made 8 more, but gradually less and less viewings of the videos. And eventually I learned that was because of TikTok. Everybody was only watching 1-minute videos. So I thought, that's impossible. I came down to 5 minutes, then 3 minutes, then 2 minutes. Then I realized I had to come down to 1 minute or less. And lots of people started to watch that, and that saved me time, because they could watch the video as many times as they needed to on their phone, and until they understood the problem, the cause, and the treatment. But of course, mental health and addiction's a pretty big field, and 1-minute videos really only cover one point. So I had to have a lot of them, and I started off with 30, then 50, then 70, and now I've got over 100, which cover almost everything in mental health and addiction. And they're at my website, which is mentalhealthvideos.com, mentalhealthvideos.com. But it became, but technology was advancing, and it became apparent that it would be far better to have an app on people's phone than to have a paper checklist, which required someone else to do it with. So apps are a lot of work, and they're very expensive, but I got very lucky and found a very capable postgraduate university student who helped me make the Mental Fix-It app, So now you can go to your phone and find the App Store or the Google Play icon or button, press on that, and in 10 seconds download the free Mental Fix-It app. And the Mental Fix-It app asks you 38 questions, which covers all parts of your mental health and life and addictions. wow, that's too long, people won't do that. No, each question has got 3 possible answers. No, it's not a problem for me. Yes, it's a moderate problem. Yes, it's a severe problem. And you just tap whichever of those 3 answers is true for you. And you can go through the 38 questions in 10 minutes. And anything you tap no twice, it only asks that question every 4th time. So very soon, the number of questions you're being asked is much less, because although everybody has multiple problems, nobody only has one problem. That's a false impression you get from talk therapy, because talk therapy is so slow that you only have time to find the biggest problem, but they've always got smaller problems which are contributing seriously to their unwellness. And the 38 questions finds the ones that they've got. They might have 15 or 20 answers to that they've got a problem with that thing. And as they tap their choice of answers to the last question, an instant report comes up on the screen of the phone which tells them which 6 of our 100 videos will help their particular problems most. And in 10 minutes they can watch those 6 videos, which are instantly available and free. So 10 seconds, download the app, 10 minutes, answer the questions, 10 minutes, look at the videos, and in less than half an hour you're miles in front. You're miles in front. You are well on your way to understanding, to knowing the problems that you've got, understanding them and the causes and the treatment. And we recommend that you repeat the app every day or 2 and watch the videos each time, multiple times. Because the instant report gives you other information. It probably the most important information it gives you is which videos to watch, but it also tells you, it lists all your problems in descending order of importance. It also tells you which medicines are most likely to work well for you. And each time you do the app, it compiles a total score, which is the scores for each question that you tapped, moderate or severe. And as you repeat the app, it turns those total scores into a graph. And the graph should be going down, because some of your highest scoring severe problems become milder. Some of your moderate problems become milder. So the total score graph should be going down. And if it's not going down, if it's horizontal, it's going up, you've got to change the treatment. So that's a great advantage, to be able to see at a glance and the instant report whether your treatment's working or not, and whether or not you've got to review the treatment and change it. So there were my tools. Videos, the mental health videos, A2Z.com site, the Mental Fix It app. And the next tool is what you're watching now. 4 months ago I'd never heard of live streaming, but my tech friend told me about it, and now I do 4 evening sessions of about an hour and a quarter, and Sunday morning session, but it's too much. I'm going to have to stop this Sunday morning sessions probably. And on average I get 2,000 to 4,000 viewers for each session, but one Saturday night session we got 8,700 viewers, and we have reasonably often got 5,000, and that's even more popular and beneficial for people to learn about mental health and addiction than the videos. And the next tool was powder medicine. With mental health and addiction things, you want the medicine to work fast. If you start to crave a cigarette, you want to take medicine that'll stop you craving it quickly as possible. Or if you see a bottle shop coming and you want to buy a bottle of bourbon, but you don't want to buy a bottle of bourbon, if the medicine works quick enough, you can avoid it. Or you might still buy the bourbon, but by the time you get the top off and start to drink it, it doesn't work very well because the medicine is blocking it. So tablets and capsules which you swallow go right down the gut and by an indirect route get into your circulation and then go to whichever part of your body the medicine needs to help, which is usually your brain. Half an hour to an hour to start and 1 to 2 hours to reach peak effect. And powder medicine that you drop on your tongue starts to work in 5 minutes and peaks in effectiveness in 10 to 15 minutes. And if the powder medicine tastes very nice, which is what we make sure it does, you start to develop taste conditioning. You've heard of Pavlov's dog and how the dogs salivated when they heard him coming because they knew he was bringing meat. Well, when you develop taste conditioning, your body starts to respond to the medicine as soon as it reaches your taste buds at the back of your tongue, which is in seconds. It starts to work, and it works much quicker. Tablets and capsules are part of the go slow pharmaceutical industry convenience. That suits them. Almost all medicines start as powder, and turning powder into tablets and capsules is a whole industry. How do you get exactly the right amount in each tablet or each capsule? How do you make sure that the tablets don't crumble and fall apart? Once a medicine is out of patent, turning it from powder to capsules or tablets doubles the cost. Well, I never recommend anything that's addictive, and I never use anything now that isn't out of patent. They keep on telling you, oh, this is new, so it's better. But what actually happens is when they discover a new medicine, they try all the molecules like it, the ones with a potassium attached or something else attached to it, and they patent the best one. But after 20 years, the patent is gone, so then half the time they manufacture the second best one and say, well, it's better, and sorry, it's 10 times as expensive, but it's new and it's better, and it's not. I don't use anything that's not out of patent, because most of the great medicines were developed in the 1970s, 80s, 90s, or early 2000s. there was a global study done in 2011 on the over 30 antidepressants available at the time. And the 4 best, 3 of them were already out of patent, and the other one was out of patent quite soon after that. And one of the 4 best was a 1991 medicine. So powder medicines have other advantages. The main advantage is they work very quickly, and I made pocket powder medicine dispensers to put the powder in. So you cut the medicine in your pocket all the time, and if you start to crave or you start to get a mental distress, you just whiz it out and drop the powder on your tongue and don't swallow it, suck it, and within 5 minutes or even faster with taste conditioning, you're getting relief. So the craving doesn't get bad and the mental distress doesn't get bad. And what happens is that you can delay the mental distress or delay taking the addictive substance that you're craving. And with the addictive substance, you can take a bit less. And what happens when you delay a habit or delay an addictive substance and reduce it slightly is that your chemistry, which has been, I was going to say buggered, but I probably shouldn't say that. If it messes up your chemistry, you have to take a bit more of the addictive substance for it to give you relief. But if you take a bit less, it weakens the addiction or weakens the mental distress, and then you can delay and reduce the addictive substance slightly. And whenever you delay a habit and do less of it, it weakens it. So you can weaken and weaken and weaken the craving for an addictive substance, and weaken and weaken and weaken a mental distress like anxiety or depression or ADD. And when you get it low enough, when you get the amount low enough, you can stop the addictive substance, you can quit. And if you've got the powder in your pocket, you don't relapse. Everybody who gets off an addictive substance fights relapse every day, and many of them relapse. The old timers would tell you, go cold turkey, just quit, just say no. I think that's what Ronald Reagan's wife said, just say no. Great if it works, but it usually doesn't work. And by the next day or the day after that, they're back on the addictive substance. But if you get off, which is much easier with powder medicine, and you've got the powder medicine in your pocket, every time you get the urge to relapse, you just whiz out and take some medicine, and that'll enable you to not relapse. And another advantage of powder is that you can vary the dose to suit you. I saw people who were 45 kilos and people who were 145 kilos. And the people who were 145 kilos needed a lot more medicine. Sorry about that. Yeah, so if you weigh 145 kilos, you need a lot more medicine than if you weigh 45 kilos. So the dose have to vary according to your weight, according to your absorption. Some people absorb it better than others. Some people burn it faster. Some people excrete it faster. When I was a kid, long time ago, you walked into a pharmacy, you see all these bottles with different coloured liquid in them. The medicines were mostly liquid, and they made them different colours. And you took half a teaspoon or a teaspoon, or you could vary the dose with liquid easily. Not very accurate because the teaspoons were all different sizes, but they didn't make plastic teaspoons for medicines in those days. But with powder you can vary the dose to suit you and to suit the severity of your condition. And you can also easily combine 2 or 3 medicines. It's much easier if someone has got a mental health disorder or 2 or 3, and they've also got an addiction or 2, and you give them one medicine, one powder medicine that fixes everything. No, it doesn't fix everything, but it might fix 3/4 of their problems instead of a half or a third. And that makes it much quicker and easier for them to get over their addiction and to break the habit, and to break the habit of their mental illness, because mental illnesses are habits. What else? No, if you go to mentalhealthvideos.com, you can read about these combinations. So nothing addictive, nothing that's still patented and costs too much, or just costs too much because it's in Australia. One of my saddest cases was a 23-year-old guy, pretty smart IT worker, who was distressed and came to see me. And I said, well, you've got ADD, ADHD, which he didn't know. And I said, but I can't prescribe the medicines for you. The 3 medicines are addictive and I'm just a GP. I can't prescribe them. And there's no use me sending you to see a specialist. He was too old for a pediatrician, but he could have seen a psychiatrist. But the psychiatrist would not be allowed to prescribe the medicines for him because he was an addict and they're addictive medicines. And as a safeguard, they weren't allowed to prescribe those ADD medicines for addicts. But I said to him, there is a medicine which I've never prescribed before, but I know about, and it's about half as strong as dexamphetamine and Ritalin, and it's not addictive, and has the great advantage that it lasts for 8 to 12 hours. So you take it in the morning, it lasts all day, whereas the addictive ADD medicines only last 3 or 4 hours. You could get slow release forms, but they often didn't work. So I gave him a prescription for 30 of these non-addictive tablets, which are called modafinil. And they were 100 milligram tablets, and he weighed 125 kilos, so he had to take 3 every morning, and they worked wonderfully for him. He was just so happy and so much better on modafinil, 300 milligrams in the morning. But 30 tablets in Australia cost him $143, and he begged and borrowed $143 to buy the first 30, but when they ran out, he just couldn't get the money to buy some more, because he had lost his job because he'd become erratic between the ADD and the drugs. And he was so disgusted that he knew what his diagnosis was, he knew the medicine he needed, he couldn't afford to get it, wasn't subsidised by the government, so he hung himself. Tried to hang himself from a hook on his bedroom door, but the hook broke. So his flatmate told me later, so a few days later he went down by the river and hung himself from a tree. The complications. So then I found I could buy 200 milligram modafinil tablets from India for 50 cents each. And that was legal, because anything that's legal in Australia, you can import 3 months worth, 90 days worth, for your own personal use from an overseas source. So from there on, of course, we treated a lot of people with ADD with modafinil. Although I later found combining it with low-dose naltrexone was even better. So what were we going to do about this terrible problem that there was never going to be enough doctors and psychologists and counsellors for all the people with mental health and addiction issues? So I developed the videos and the Mental Fix-It app, and had the website with all the information on that, and then started to do the live streaming Tuesday, Thursday, Saturday and Sunday around 7 to 8 o'clock Perth time, which is 12 hours ahead of New York and 2 hours ahead of Melbourne and Sydney. And then we had the powder medicines, and they had the pocket dispensers. And then meditation is very helpful for people with these problems. But the people who would benefit most have great difficulty learning to meditate. Meditation is a habit. You have to, habits are all developed by repetition. You have to do them over and over and over again until they become automatic. And there are a lot of people who've been meditating for 20 or 30 years, and they can meditate standing in a queue or riding in a bus, or during lunch break. So about 30 years ago I tried to learn to meditate. Spent money on it but failed. You can probably see I'm a bit hyper. What is meditation? Meditation is taking a little holiday from all your stresses and strains by focusing on something. You don't do the evil focus of Guantanamo Bay and the CIA and conspiracy. You focus either on a word or on your breathing. With the word, they just give you a word and you just say that word over and over and over again, and you focus on that word and you forget about everything else. Or you focus on your breathing and you forget about everything else. The breathing is the best if you can learn to do it. But I misunderstood originally when they said focus on your breathing. I thought they meant focus on your breathing, but they mean breathe and focus on. It's an activity. It's not an observation. It's an activity. You focus on breathing. What I notice is just before I go to sleep, my breathing gets very steady. Well, that's what you want to do for meditation. And if you're very anxious, so you'll benefit greatly from meditation. It's hard to do. So about 5 years ago, I got an old stethoscope and cut it short and learnt to meditate. This is the hearing part, by listening to my heart. If you put the hearing part under your clothes, on the skin, over your heart, left upper chest, the heart beats quite loud and strong and interesting, and I found that I could focus on that and forget the other things, and after a couple of months I was good enough with that I could do it focusing on my breathing. And when you do it for long enough, it's very it becomes almost a subconscious habit that you can do anytime, anywhere, for mostly between 3 and 30 minutes, preferably at least once a day. I had a friend who told me that whenever she wanted anything from her father, she would ask him after he'd meditated. Because when he came from home from work, he'd always meditate, and after he meditated, he was a much happier, easier person to deal with. Yeah. So I believe that the solution to the mental health and addiction problem is better tools that enable self-help to start very early. We've recently, we know that we should have more contact with our viewers, and I'm so bad at technology that that's hard for me, but we've started a new site called Smile Fix It Club. smilefixit.club. Smilefixit.club. And I'm going to put what I'm going to read to you a summary of where I'm up to, which will very soon be on the smilefixit.club. Everyone can now, at any time, anywhere, immediately start getting a happier, healthier life with a smartphone and our free self-help tools. We can all start getting happier and healthier by understanding that every one of us started out as a tiny, very helpless, dependent baby, and that there have never been any perfect mothers or fathers or any perfect families, and the world is not perfect. So all of us, as we grew, sometimes had nasty experiences and unmet needs that caused us distressed feelings, thoughts and behaviours, which if severe or if repeated often enough became habits. So almost all of us have some minor or major mental distress habits that could last for years or for a lifetime, often getting worse and causing more problems. But we now have the tools and ways to break all bad habits and to make new, far better habits, so people don't need to continue to being distressed or to crash. In 10 seconds on your phone, tap the App Store or Google Play icon button and download the Mental Fix-It app. It's free. In 10 minutes, tap your choice of 3 possible answers for each app question about every important part of your life. An instant app report then appears on the screen that lists all of your problems in descending order of importance. In 10 minutes, immediately watch the 6 of our over 100 under-a-minute videos. The report explains will give you a clear understanding of those problems, their causes, and how to start fixing them. So, in just 30 minutes, you'll be far better. Do as much as you can yourself, as soon as you can, repeating the check and the videos most days to get clearer and clearer and clearer. And you can instantly share your reports online with doctors and anyone else who might help you, and see your doctor to get prescriptions as needed. And we have no record of your problems that can get leaked, because the only record is on your phone and anyone you choose to share it with. Waiting until people have suffered severely and or crashed is crazy, inhumane, very costly, and probably now the world's greatest problem. There'd be no war in the Ukraine if a certain person didn't have terrible mental health problems. We'll have the list of the tools. There's 7 I've told you about, and there's 2 more. I have to refine this to put it in writing, but the make and break habit method and tool, and the smile tools. The single most important habit you can have is to smile as often as possible. When you feel good, your good chemistry is high. Your serotonin, dopamine, oxytocin, and over 20 endorphins. And when you smile or laugh, your brain produces even more of those happy chemicals. And the over 20 endorphins manage your immune system. And your immune system is cells and antibodies and chemistry in every part of your body that fight infections, allergies, inflammation, autoimmune diseases and cancers. So that keeps you healthy, and you're happier when you're healthy. Okay, maybe we'll see you again on Tuesday. Bye.